Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another session for the 2025 CLIA Global Cruise Line webinar series. We're excited to be joining you today with Pearl Seas Cruises. My name is Johanna de Guzman. I am the Manager of Industry Relations for North American Travel Trade Membership here at CLIA. Before we dive into today's presentation, I want to quickly cover a few housekeeping items. We encourage you to engage actively by submitting your questions through the webinar's questions module, and if time permits, we will get to them at the conclusion of the presentation during the live Q&A session. For those of you who might miss today's live session or want to review the content later, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on CLIA's YouTube channel, CLIA Global. It is my pleasure to introduce one of your speakers for today, Melissa Young, Director of Business Development for American Cruise Lines and Pearl Sea Cruises. Melissa Young leads the business development team for both American Cruise Lines and Pearl Seas Cruises, managing the company's agency partnership globally. Melissa has worked in the travel industry for many years and has a strong background in sales, marketing, and brand development, and most recently serving as the Director of Sales for Red Carnation Hotels, a collection of luxury boutique hotels. Melissa is focused on working with agency owners and travel advisors to grow small ship cruising in North America. And with that, take it away, Melissa.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today to learn a little bit about Pearl Seas Cruises. As Joe mentioned, Pearl Seas and American Cruise Lines are owned by the same family. We're a family owned and operated business, now in business for more than 50 years. And I'm really pleased to be joined by my lovely colleague, Kristen Lambert. Kristen joined American Cruise Lines 9 years ago as a cruise and excursions director and has worked her way up to operations manager for Pearl Seas Cruises. She's actually based on the ships, and she's responsible for the long-term strategic planning and current and new cruise itinerary development, excursions, enrichment, and she acts as the ship's agent in several ports along the Great Lakes. So we have a real expert on the Great Lakes with us, and I'd like to introduce you to Kristen. Take it away, Kristen.
Thank you, Melissa. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And I will apologize in advance. I am currently on board the ship, and we have excursions departing probably within this meeting. So if you hear the ding, 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 that is the ship's announcement system. So I'll probably mute unless everybody wants to hear the announcements being made for the excursion dispatches. But I'm really excited to share a little bit about Pearl Seas Cruises with you all. As Melissa mentioned, I started with American Cruise Lines 9 years ago, and within 2016, I moved over to Pearl Seas, specifically on the Great Lakes. I'm from Illinois, and I love being able to cruise basically in the backyard and always share some of these really incredible and special moments with our guests. So today we'll be going over the itineraries that Pearl Seas Cruises currently offers. We have had other itineraries on our list in previous seasons, and we're hoping to have some more in the future. But right now we are just one ship, the Pearl Mist, and we'll get started with the slides so then I could dive a little bit more into our history for you.
And we're starting with our video, which brings the scenery to life.
All right, so as you just saw little snippets of the Pearl Mist, we are an international small ship. So Pearl Seas Cruises, we fly an international flag. As Melissa mentioned, we are sister companies with American Cruise Lines. American Cruise Lines is all US flagged. Their crew are all US, and then their ships are also built within the US, and our company also has our own shipbuilding in Chesapeake, Maryland. So all of our American Cruise Lines vessels do come from Maryland, whereas the Pearl Mist, we are internationally flagged. We have a full international crew, and we can visit international ports by being flagged international. We're flagged Marshall Islands, and the Pearl Mist was built in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is one of our most popular destinations on our Canadian Maritimes and New England itineraries. So within all of the destinations that we visit with the Great Lakes, the Canadian Maritimes, we do craft shore excursions that really appeal to our demographic. And our average demographic is more of the seasoned traveler. They're experienced, and age range is probably about 70 to 72, but we do accommodate children. We actually have a 19-year-old on board right now, and last cruised we had a 5-year-old traveling with their grandparents. So we do see a lot of generations traveling within all of our itineraries with Pearl Mist as well as American Cruise Lines. And of course, our crew, we hear nothing but amazing things, and we would be nowhere without the crew that we currently have on board. Earlier this year, the VP and the president of our company joined us in Portland, Maine, where we celebrated 26 out of our 65 crew members who have been on board the Pearl Mist for 10 or 11 seasons, which is the duration of our time traveling with Pearl Mist. We've been sailing since 2014, and we've had crew members that have been on board every single season since then. They have not traveled with any other cruise line, and even during COVID, they waited until the Pearl Mist returned to the lakes to rejoin us. So we've got more than a dedicated crew that are always catering to every passenger's wish, need, desire, and it really makes our company stand out. And of course, we're affiliated with our sister company, American Cruise Lines. Both companies are headquartered in Guilford, Connecticut, and we're a small team that work for Pearl Seas Cruises. I believe I'm the only employee that currently only works for Pearl Seas. I, of course, have worked for both lines, but it's really nice to focus on our international ship that we love sailing along the Midwest, especially since that's where I'm from. So the next slide that we will be showing to you, these are actually a few different slides that we'll have that show the ship itself. You've already seen a small video of it focusing on our dining team, on our culinary team, and then, of course, the ship itself. So as I mentioned, we hold up to 200 guests, and every stateroom has a balcony, which is really nice and convenient, especially on the lakes when we're traveling the fall foliage in the Canadian Maritimes. We're the only cruise ship that cruises the Great Lakes where every single stateroom has a balcony, which is very convenient. We have new modern designs and decor. We just renovated the entire ship 2 seasons ago, and we are constantly enhancing and adding and upgrading every season. So the Pearl Mist, we currently just cruise between the months of May and November. In the off season, we do lay up in Norfolk, Virginia. In the previous seasons before COVID, we were cruising Cuba. That was a very popular destination for us. We had 25 great trips to Cuba. They were 11-day round trips to Fort Lauderdale, and that was our winter itinerary. But since COVID happened and some other things to happen in the world, we are no longer visiting Cuba. So we are focusing on the Great Lakes and the Canadian Maritimes between the months of May and November, and we're working on some new destinations in the winter as well. And we're always sending out surveys to our current guests to ask them where they would like to go. So that is where we're getting our ideas from. So on the next slide, if you can, Melissa, this itinerary, the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Great Lakes, this is one of our newer itineraries. So we, as I mentioned, we have our Canadian Maritime, St. Lawrence Seaway, and the Great Lakes. This is a small combination of both of those. So this only operates once, and that is in September. This is our last Great Lakes itinerary. So this is the trip that we take to get us out of the lakes for the summer and then into the Maritimes for that fall foliage that everybody loves to see. This is a 15-night itinerary. It does not call all 5 Great Lakes. We have other itineraries that do, but this one focuses on the 4 Great Lakes minus Superior, plus Georgian Bay, which of course is beautiful and can easily be called the 6th Great Lake. So this is the trip that starts in Milwaukee, and then we'll make our way to some smaller destinations like Muskegon, Michigan, which is where we also visit Holland, Michigan. If those are interested to see the last standing Dutch windmill in the country, we take them over to Holland for the day. We'll have lunch at a blueberry farm, some time to shop downtown Holland, and they are accompanied by a really amazing tour guide with Dutch history within her family and herself. We also offer some really interesting excursions, riding sand dunes with wine accompanied. On the side, of course, not actually on the sand dune, but we visit the Meyer Sculpture Park Gardens, which are really beautiful. And then we also offer downtown trolley tours of Muskegon, which houses a number of small and interesting museums and a lot of great restaurants that guests can easily walk to. That's crossing, of course, Lake Michigan, and then we'll be making our way up to the Straits of Mackinac, where we'll visit Mackinac Island for the day. And of course, that is always the port that everybody is most excited to visit. We spend the full day there, and we offer the traditional horse-drawn carriage ride, and almost everybody always selects that. It is the best way to see the island. It takes about 3.5 hours total for the tour, and you start off in the downtown area, then you'll make your way through the state park, visit Fort Mackinac, famous Arch Rock, and then of course ending at the Grand Hotel, where many of our guests decide to enjoy lunch, or you could sit on the famous porch, rocking, having a drink, and then make your way back to the ship whenever you would like to. Once we're departing Mackinac Island, we make our way to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is our first Canadian port of call. So you will notice within all of our itineraries on the lakes, we do go in and out of the States as well as Canada quite a bit, which means we do clear customs when that happens. So all of that is taken care of typically on the ship, unless one of the ports requires the guest to go to their customs facility. And if that's the case, it's only a couple of minutes away, and then we will continue on to excursions from there. But Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, this is, of course, where the Soo locks are that would transport you up to Lake Superior if we were going that direction. But for here, we just stop, we clear customs in Canada, and we offer a few different excursions that really focus and highlight maple syrup in Canada. We visit an incredible bush plane museum where they learn all about the different vintage aircrafts, and they could even step inside of some of them. The Ermitinger Clerg National Historic Site that houses one of the oldest stone houses in Ontario, and it has a lot of information about the War of 1812. And this is also where we offer some kayaking tours on the St. Mary's River, which is really beautiful. Then we're going to continue on to Parry Sound, which is the heart of Georgian Bay and the 30,000 Islands. So probably one of the most scenic parts of the entire itinerary. Almost all of our guests are either on their balconies or out on the top deck watching us dock. And all of our excursions in Parry Sound are outdoors because that is the highlight of this portion of our trip. We have 2 and 3 hour Island Queen excursions, which take you around some of the 30,000 islands. It's narrated. The boats are indoor or outdoors. They have a cafe. So it's really convenient and beautiful way to see some additional islands that we did not pass on the Pearl Mist. We also offer plane scene tours, float plane scene tours, and they're about 30 minutes or so. And that's just a really incredible view to see, again, some of these amazing islands that we're cruising through. And then, of course, traditional walking tours that will lead down paths with information with local naturalists, just sharing some of the biosphere, as Parry Sound is UNESCO World Heritage. So it's a really incredible place to visit. And then we'll make our way sailing to Midland, which is also still in Georgian Bay. It's not too far, where we showcase some of the local cuisine by offering walking tours with multiple stops at some local restaurants for some local flavor of Ontario, we offer some more of the historical sites, which would include the Ste. Marie among the Hurons, which is a Wendat Jesuit village. So it's basically just a huge living museum, indoor and outdoor, as well as the Discovery Harbor, which is an old British naval base, and guests have the opportunity to wander at their leisure. And there are plenty of guides stationed around the facility to answer and give some impersonations if they're interested. We also offer another cruise here just to see some different islands of Georgian Bay, and that's on a speedboat, and it holds about 45 guests, and we typically have the entire boat reserved to ourselves because we always fill up all the spaces, which is really nice, and it's just a short walk from where we dock to get to that boat itself. After Midland, we'll have a day of cruising, which is really nice because our guests are almost worn out at that point because there's so much to see and do in all of the ports. So it's challenging for them to enjoy the onboard activities, which we do have a lot of course. We travel with an onboard guest speaker who is native to the region. They've been cruising with us for several years. They're very well versed in the nature, the history, the wildlife, and it's just a really great way to enhance their cruise experience. Every evening at 8 o'clock, we offer a port preview of the following port for the next day, and that includes the cruise director as well as the guest speaker, and they will give the guests some information on what to expect and just some of the history and the highlights of the upcoming port. But when we're sailing, we also, of course, have onboard entertainment that travel with us. And when we have an overnight in port, I'll bring on local musicians or a magician, a comedian, and it's just really fun. It's, I think, the only time of the day that all the guests are able to sit back, have a drink, relax, and chat with each other about what they did earlier in the day because everybody signs up for different excursions and we have a lot to offer. So the evening entertainment with the entertainment is really special. Of course, if you're a dancer too, we highly encourage dancing on the dance floor, which is always fun. But the sailing days are really nice because you could plan them as you'd like. You could enjoy it from your balcony. We have plenty of rocking chairs out on the open decks. We have 3 open decks where guests can take advantage of the views and just relax. Our bar opens earlier on our sailing days. We have plenty of activities such as trivia, bingo, different things. What we really ask the guests, what would you like to do on our underway day? And we go from there just to cater to all of their wishes for their cruise that they're taking. After Midland, we're making our way to Detroit, Michigan, which of course is also a highlight, but we're back into the United States. So every guest must clear US customs, and that is done by busing everybody to the customs facility, which is just 2 minutes away. Once you clear customs, you make your way back to that motor coach, and then you continue on to your excursion that you signed up for. So we have a method to the madness, and we have it all worked out, but it's always fun to share with the guests. Yes, you are back in the US, your country for most of them, but you still need to clear into customs. But Detroit is really a special place. We dock right in the heart of the downtown, and there's plenty to see and do just walking distance. They've got an amazing river walk, lots of action and activities and restaurants close by. And then, of course, our excursions. I always ask on day one, what is everybody most excited for? And of course, the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit is always mentioned, and that is probably one of the most popular excursions we have to offer here on our Great Lakes. You could spend 3 days at the Henry Ford Museum in the Greenfield Village and still not see it all. And just 2 trips ago, we actually had a guest that is a docent at the Henry Ford Museum. So he volunteered to give a presentation the day before we got there to give all of the other guests tips and tricks on how to get the most of their visit. So it's always really interesting to see who comes on board, and it's really exciting. So besides the Henry Ford Museum, there are plenty of other incredible places to see, like the Piquette plant, which shows all of the Model Ts, A through Z, I believe. And then, of course, Motown Museum. When we do offer the Motown Museum, it's one of the most interesting and fun experiences, I think, on the entire itinerary. They have a guided tour of the small museum, and then you drive around the motor coach with a local guide, listening to different music and seeing some historical sites in downtown Detroit. Then we'll make our way to Cleveland, which is also a wonderful city. There's a lot to see and do in Cleveland. And continuing on the musical theme is, of course, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is always very popular. And we dock about it's 7/10 of a mile from where we dock to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So many guests will just walk and visit at their leisure. They could spend as much or as little time as they'd like there. But we also have motor coaches that will take them morning and afternoon, in addition to an Amish experience, which is a full day excursion. We have this offered on every trip with the exception of Sundays. Sometimes Cleveland falls on a Sunday. So if you have guests or clients that would really like to take this Amish excursion, make sure that we are not in Cleveland on a Sunday, because the Amish do not work on Sundays. So we do not offer that then, but when we do, it's a full day experience and they really dive into the traditions and the culture. They have a local Amish community member step-on guide with them all day. They'll have a traditional meal in an Amish family's home that is prepared for them right there, and then visiting some local sites as well. And then, of course, Cleveland is just a really beautiful city to ride around in. So we have city tours on the motor coach with no stops, just some photo views of from the windows, which are 2 hours long, which is kind of nice because at this point in the trip, people are getting tired, and we know on and off the buses sometimes gets tiresome. So there's always a lot to see and do in Cleveland, whether you're walking or riding around the city with us. And then, of course, we'll sail the next day, which is our opportunity to sail through Lake Erie. And then in the evening, we'll be docking in Port Colborne, Ontario, which is the port of call where we visit for Niagara Falls. And almost every guest that travels with us goes to Niagara. So it's about a 45-minute drive, and there's local step-on guides that will accompany us, and they'll share some of the history of Niagara, the interesting people that have gone over the falls, attempted to go over more than once. So it's always fun to rehear those stories. And then, of course, you'll have the opportunity to take the Hornblower, which is the boat ride through the falls, or take the Journey Behind the Falls, which takes you through tunnels and you're standing right near the falls. Either direction you go, you will be given a poncho, you will get wet, and it's a lot of fun. We'll depart Port Colborne around 1 p.m. because that is when we will transit through the Welland Canal, which is where we go through 8 locks to get to Lake Ontario. So it's very interesting to see all of the different locks. And, you know, sometimes people will say, once you've seen one, you've seen them all, but these are really impressive. And we try to get through most of them in the daytime, of course. Then we'll get to Toronto. We'll have a full day of excursions, and some of those highlights are Casa Loma, the CN Tower, walking tours of the Distillery District. Toronto is such a great city. You absolutely need more than just a day there. So we always recommend, you know, coming back with us on another trip so you could see something that you didn't on the first time. And then we'll make our way through to Kingston, Ontario. And that is such a neat small community where they have their means of transportation are mostly small red trolleys. So there's a number of different opportunities to see some historical sites like Fort Henry or the Kingston Pen, where they have guided tours, and the tour guides of the Kingston Pen are actually former guards of when it was running itself. So it's very interesting to hear some of those stories, and it's just a great place to walk around and take a trolley tour. They have a new exhibit there called the SS Keewatin, which is an older steamship that used to cruise on the Great Lakes several years ago. It was built in 1907, and that actually used to be docked in Midland, Ontario before COVID. And that was our number one attraction where we would take our guests to in Midland, but then they moved the Keewatin through to Kingston, and it did go through, it had to be tugged through the Welland Canal to Kingston, Ontario, and now that's also one of the highlights for our guests in Kingston as well. And then from there, we will be cruising through the Thousand Islands, which are very beautiful, through New York. We have nothing but onboard activities throughout the day, especially outside on the open deck, so people can really enjoy the views, to get us to Montreal, which of course is a beautiful city. We'll spend the full day there offering guided walking tours or city tours, visiting Notre Dame, and it's just a magnificent place in especially because of where we dock in Montreal as well as Quebec City. We are walking distance from the downtown where all the shops, the restaurants, the people watching, anything that you would want to see and do, you can mostly do it by foot in these larger cities, which is really convenient. And then, of course, we'll make our way to Quebec City, which is where we'll spend a full day of excursions visiting Montmorency Falls, the Chateau Frontenac Hotel, which is just steps away from where we actually dock, and it's beautiful views from the ship as well. And then that is where our guests will go home. So this is the 15-night itinerary from Milwaukee to Quebec, and that is our last Great Lakes cruise of the season, because then once we get to Quebec City, we will continue on through the Maritimes, ending in Portland, Maine. And I know we have a slide about that one as well. Um, but yeah, we can go to the next one. All right. The next slide, I think, was our Great Lakes Explorers. This is the itinerary that was brand new last year. This gets us into all 5 of the Great Lakes. So as you could see from the map, we pretty much call almost all of the same ports with the exception of Lower Lake Michigan. So once this cruise will start in Toronto and in Duluth, Minnesota, or vice versa. And we call all 5 of the Great Lakes on this one. So it's really interesting because I had mentioned Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario on the first slide, but on this itinerary, we don't call the Ontario, we call Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, because that is where we can go through the Soo Lock to get into Lake Superior. And then from there, we have various ports of call along Lake Superior. In a couple of seasons, we will actually change up our Lake Superior ports of calls. We will stick to the south shore of Lake Superior, which offers our guests a better opportunity to see some of the most beautiful landscapes of Superior, like Pictured Rocks, the Apostle Islands, and then cruising through the Keweenaw Peninsula, which is just after Marquette. There's a small port called Houghton, Michigan in the Keweenaw Peninsula, and it has a lot of Finnish culture and mining heritage. So we will be changing up our Lake Superior ports not next year, but the year following to get to Duluth. And what's also nice about that is on this current itinerary, we go in and out of the US or Canada 5 times, which means you have to clear customs 5 times, and it gets a little much, lots of paperwork that we have to fill out. And so by sticking to the South Shore, which is just the US, we will reduce it to 3 times, which will be much better for our guests. And there's just so much to see and do along the South Shore of Superior. So we offer this itinerary twice a season in June, and it's one direction, Toronto to Duluth, and then we'll go the reverse direction. Next. And then, of course, the heart of Pearl Seas Cruises. This is our #1 itinerary. We offer it more than any other, the Great Lakes and Georgian Bay. We're currently in Milwaukee right now. We just completed the Toronto to Milwaukee trip, which is very similar to what I had mentioned on the first slide, with the exception of getting into Kingston, Montreal, Quebec. So we'll go through Toronto. We'll go through the Welland Canal, which is where those 8 locks were, and then we will end in Milwaukee. So we offer this trip 7 or 11 nights. So we will have 2 7-night cruises of this, which would be Milwaukee to Midland, Ontario. And then from Midland, Ontario, the closest airport is Toronto, and that is about 2 hours away. So then guests, if they're disembarking in Midland, we will transport them to Toronto Airport on turnaround day or their disembarkation day. And then the guests that are starting their journey in Midland, we will transport them from Toronto via motor coach to Midland, and then we'll make our way down to Milwaukee. So again, we offer this version 7 or 11 nights. And then if you're on the 7-night trip, you are not getting to see Detroit, Cleveland, or Niagara Falls. Next slide. And then the Canada and New England fall foliage. The first slide, of course, was Milwaukee to Quebec. And then the ship, after the last Great Lakes season cruise, we will continue on from Quebec City to Portland, Maine. So this is a really beautiful trip. And of course, everybody wants to see the fall colors. And we all know we can't control that. So we always cross our fingers and hope for the best. But regardless of the colors, these ports are magnificent and they have so much history there, and they're really unique in smaller ports. But we also have some of the larger cities along this itinerary too, which makes for a really great combination trip. Starting in Quebec City, we'll cruise through Saguenay, which is beautiful. The Saguenay Fjord. We cruise through the daylight, which is probably the most scenic part of the itinerary because you've got colors and just some really beautiful scenery on both sides of the vessel. Saguenay is a small community, and this is where the heart of most of the French speaking guides are. So we always prepare our guests, who are predominantly Americans, that you will hear a difference in all of the accents along this itinerary, which makes it a little bit more special. Saguenay is beautiful, of course, for the scenery, and they've got some really interesting excursions to visiting blueberry farms and wineries and local artisans. They also offer float scene plane rides too, which are super popular, of course, in the fall. And then we'll make our way to Bay Como, which is a small port, but it's probably one of the best places for us to try to see some whales. Within the region of Gaspé and the Gaspé Peninsula, we have to go a certain speed. If your ship is caught going over 9 knots, you'll be heavily fined just because of the wildlife and the whales in the region. So we have to go very slow, which is great for us to be able to try to see some wildlife. And whenever we do see anything, we make sure to make an announcement if it's at a reasonable time of night or morning, of course, to inform everybody. Look over to the port side or the starboard side and take a look to see, if there's always something. But the Gaspé region is really beautiful. That is where a lot of the famous fall colors are. Um, Visiting Percé, which has the famous Percé rock formation, and it's a beautiful drive to get over there. Or even Young National Park, which is beautiful with a local tour guide. You get to walk around a park for the afternoon and see some just really incredible scenery. And then Ile de la Madeleine, that is a very unique location. It's very challenging to get to. So we always cross our fingers for some really great weather. We've been very lucky, but it is a small islands, and we will dock and spend just about 5 hours there. And the tours that we offer, it really takes you around all of the islands, and you're sampling cheese, you're sampling some gin from a local distillery, or you're visiting the lighthouse and walking around the Redstone Sand Cliffs. So it's just a really interesting place, and it's not like any other that is offered on the itinerary. So we always encourage the guests to sign up for an excursion here, because if you don't, it's really hard to just see how much beauty there is. All of the homes that are next to each other are all painted different colors. I think it's a rule there, but it's so colorful and beautiful, and it's definitely not to be missed. The highlight of this itinerary, I would say, for almost everybody is, of course, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. Anne of Green Gables fans, PEI mussels, potatoes, lobster. This is a great place to eat, great place to see some local scenery within just taking excursions out to the Anne of Green Gables site. That's where you get to see some of the countryside. We offer food walking tours. We offer cruises around the island, but this is such a unique place, and the town really welcomes cruise ships. They always offer some type of welcome, whether it be free oysters on the pier shucked right in front of you, or the raspberry cordial, of course, if you know Anne of Green Gables, non-alcoholic version. But it is such a wonderful place, and it is absolutely the highlight. And then, of course, we'll make our way to Nova Scotia, calling Pictou, which is the birthplace of Nova Scotia. Halifax, which is amazing. That is, of course, where the Pearl Mist was built. And we offer a variety of excursions visiting Peggy's Cove, which is one of the most photographed lighthouses. We have an excursion that focuses on the Titanic, where you visit the public gardens and the Fairview Lawn Cemetery, where many of the Titanic victims are buried. And then, of course, spending time at the Maritime Museum, which is really fantastic. And then we'll make our way to Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, which is absolutely breathtaking. We do anchor here. no ship can dock in Lunenburg, but it's only about a 7-minute tender ride. And that is where you get the $1 million photo of the downtown of Lunenburg. It is breathtaking. And we offer walking tours as well as a bus tour around Lunenburg and the neighboring community of Mahone Bay. And then we'll visit Bar Harbor, or as many people call it, Bahaba, depends on where you're from. But that, of course, is an amazing place. If you've been, you absolutely know. You don't even need to take an excursion there. You could just wander at your leisure and have an amazing time. Try the lobster ice cream. It's not that bad, but it's just, it's a special place. And of course, Acadia National Park is definitely something that everybody looks forward to. And then we'll reach Portland, Maine, which would conclude the itinerary for us. And then in the fall, we offer this itinerary 3 times. So we'll offer Quebec to Portland, and then we'll turn in Portland and go right back to Quebec. And then one last time, Quebec to Portland, which this season will reach on November 3rd. And from there, all of our guests will disembark. And then our ship will sail to Norfolk, Virginia, where the crew will depart to go home. And then they will return there in April to start up the next season. One thing I wanted to mention about these itineraries is, and I think there might be one more itinerary. It should be Portland to Toronto. Yep, so this one right here is Canadian Maritimes and St. Lawrence Seaway. This is the very first itinerary that we offer for the season. This gets us to the Great Lakes for the summer. The Great Lakes is, of course, our main itinerary that we offer with Pearl Seas Cruises, but it's very similar to the ones I've already mentioned. It starts in Portland, and then you make your way through the St. Lawrence Seaway, and I didn't mention this on the first one, but we do transit the locks of the St. Lawrence Seaway, and there are 7 of them. So once we depart Montreal, we'll clear 7 locks, and then we'll make our way to Kingston. And then once we reach Toronto, that is where we have turnaround. So this is a 15-night cruise. We only offer it once, and it's already sold out for next year, and it's almost sold out for 2027 because it's very popular. And this is an itinerary that many people will take, and they end up remaining on board for the next one to get to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that is a 15-night cruise plus an 11-night. So you're on board for about 27 days. So you can travel almost all of the itineraries that Pearl Seas offers back to back. And it's really convenient because you get to see everything. But what ends up almost happening is they don't want to leave after that, because then they have to go back home to cook for themselves, do their own laundry, which is another thing we offer here. We do everybody's laundry complimentary. We do not have public laundry units, so you just have to talk to your housekeeping steward and we'll take care of it for you. But that is our first itinerary of the season, gets us into the Great Lakes, and we run all the others from there. And then, of course, these are some of the highlights that I briefly mentioned. Our fleet, the Pearl Mist, is so fantastic that we thought we only need one ship in Pearl Seas Cruises. So we currently just have the Pearl Mist running. I don't think there's really been discussion on if there will be a second ship for the fleet, because we're trying to extend our current season, and it's challenging to have another ship when our current ship is not running year round. So I think once we can find a good place for the Pearl Mist to call home in the winter times, we'll look at expanding the fleet. And then, of course, our crew on board, the gracious hospitality. As I've mentioned, 26 out of 65 have been on board for 10 or 11 years, which I think says it all. Our cuisine, we do purchase local products, so we always bring on fresh live lobster in our Maritimes ports, and then along the Great Lakes, lots of whitefish. So we also have in some of our ports, I always try to bring on some local flavor, especially local beer and wine. And we do beer tastings in Perry Sound, and some of the other various ports on the Maritimes will gin sample on board. So it's really nice because you don't have to leave the ship to really get a taste of the ports that we're visiting. The balconies, of course, that's a huge one. I find that all of our guests like to see where we're docking. They are out on their balconies in the morning. And then our daily entertainment, we have our resident musicians that travel with us. They perform during cocktail hour every day, which is offered from 5:30 to 7 in both of our lounges. And then, of course, in the evening for entertainment, and the bar opens every day at 2 o'clock. So it's pretty nice and convenient. And if you ever wanted something earlier than that, you're more than welcome to just ask for it, and we're happy to accommodate. And then, of course, our amenities. Every room is pretty large. I've never had any guest say that, they couldn't fit their suitcase or another bed or another person in their room, which is pretty awesome. So more room for activities. And then, of course, our excursions. We do have guided excursions. We have complimentary excursions, at least offered in every port, but we do have excursions that have an additional cost. So that could range from $15 for a premium excursion, and premium excursions are typically under $100, and then anything over $100 is a signature excursion. And I know on the next slide I'll talk a little bit more about how that works with our guests. So our loyalty program is the Eagle Society. The Pearl Mist used to have the Oyster Society. It was separate than the Eagle Society. American Cruise Lines has always been the Eagle Society, and just last year we decided to combine the societies. Instead of having the Eagle and then the Oyster, we are now united. We are all one society, which means that all of the onboard benefits that you would receive with American Cruise Lines now crosses over to Pearl Seas Cruises, and that really does make such a difference. One thing that we have always done is, if you've traveled with our company, Pearl Seas or American Cruise Lines, 3 times, then starting on your 4th cruise, all of your premium excursions are included already. Before last year, we were separate. So 1 cruise on Pearl Seas Cruises and 4 cruises on American Cruise Lines did not equal 5. They were separate societies. But so that meant you had to travel with Pearl 3 more times to get free excursions and vice versa. So, but now the loyalty programs are combined. So if you've traveled once on Pearl, 4 times on American, that means you've been with our company 5 times. And that really adds up, especially not only the free excursions, or at least the complimentary premium excursions after 3 cruises. After your 10th cruise, your 11th is free. And how that works is the company will take the average of all of the 10 cruises that you've been on based on the length of the trip, what stateroom you've always been in, and they'll take the average, and that is what they would offer as complimentary. And that's not only for the 11th, it's the 22nd, the 33rd, the 44th, the 55th. Last cruise, we had a woman on her 43rd cruise, so we were trying to help her plan her free one for 44. And obviously, we don't have that many itineraries, but within American Cruise Lines, we are constantly growing. We have another ship coming out this year. We have 3 more next year, which will total us to 22 ships at the end of this year. And we are always looking for new destinations to keep our guests coming back to us, so they have the experience that they have always had from the start. So some really great benefits. Those are probably the top ones. And a really great one is rescheduling penalty free until final payment, which is 90 days before the cruise actually departs. So while you're on board, or you may not know what you'd like your schedule to be, you could still make a reservation with us. And especially if you've traveled with us before, you could put down a deposit, which is $500 per person for a trip that is 8 days or less, and it's $900 per person for a trip that is longer. But if you've traveled with us before, and let's say your schedule changes, or somebody is getting married now on the date of your cruise, as long as it is 90 days before your cruise departure, you could change that penalty free. There's no change fee, which is really nice. And I know a lot of our Eagle Society guests have enjoyed that, because you never know your schedule.
Absolutely. And just to point out to our travel advisors tuning in that if your clients book when they're on board with us, we automatically assign the credit to you for that particular booking. So something you could encourage them to do is to take advantage of booking on board. And then our very last slide here is just about our business development team. We have 4 business development managers located across the United States, and myself located in our office in Guilford, Connecticut. So you could see the states that they cover. And we tend to engage with advisors, should engage with the business development manager where they're based, not necessarily where your agency is located. This helps us if we ever are able to host a lunch, a ship inspection, a training, we know where you are. So reach out to the one who's closest to where you are based. And I've also put our groups manager, Izzy Pearson's information here as well. And then along the bottom, you have, if you have an inquiry, have any questions about a particular booking, want to get a quote, we have a toll-free number and an email is inquiry@pearlseascruises.com. These both go to our call center in Salt Lake City that fields your questions for American Cruise Lines. So they are very knowledgeable, and we're constantly hearing how great they are. So as if you have any sort of inquiries you want to pursue, that's the best way to go about it. And then last but not least, I just want to thank Kristen. Her knowledge and of the itineraries and the daily functioning of the Pearl Mist is so very much appreciated. Thank you, Kristen. You did a great job of taking us through the itineraries, and we really appreciate you being here. And now we're open for questions if anyone has any questions.
Melissa and Kristen, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us and sharing all this information about Pearl Sea Cruises. So we did have a few questions here. I think it's safe to say that this is a lot of our advisors' first introduction to Pearl Seas. So could you just go over or just review or give them the link to where they can go to get more information or more training to become experts at on Pearl Seas?
Yeah, that would be pearlseascruises.com is a great source of information. And then to reach out to the business development manager on that slide, or to go to American Cruise Lines Travel Advisor portal as well. They can find those same BDM managers listed there.
Great, because I know that there were a bunch of people asking where they can find that information. I don't think they were able to catch some of those
Oh,
emails on that last slide. If
oh,
you
I
want to
see.
share it, we can leave it up to Melissa.
Okay, good. I'll do that. I'll bring it back up.
Okay, great. And while you're pulling that up, Kristen, I know that you are on board right now, so you have that unique perspective of giving and sharing information from life on board. Could you just talk about, I guess, the different activities for the different groups that our advisors might bring on board with Pearl Seas, whether it be multi-gen or adventurers or people who may be more interested in the excursions. Could you just give us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have somebody that caters to all of the groups. So if you're doing a group sale or if guests are individuals wanting to have a little bit more inside scoop of specific excursions, or maybe they received their online portal, which I haven't mentioned yet, but 60 days prior to the cruise departure, all the guests will receive a link, and that is where they sign up for their excursion. So they could see all of the options, the descriptions, they have the sailing instructions. So they could take a look at those, and that's where they'll get most of the information for excursions. But what's really nice is if we have a group on board, we have a group specialist. I believe it's Izzy, and she will work with the group leader as well as myself. And there's a sheet that she'll ask them to fill out and exactly what it is they're looking for. So if they wanted to spend their days looking for different places to drink local wine or local beer, then that's something I can help her out with. Or if they wanted special cocktail hours every evening, then there's a place on the ship that we could designate for that. So we're always flexible with working with different groups. And if there's ever an excursion of some sort that maybe everybody's interested that's not listed, I'm more than happy to always reach out to the supplier or do research, because I plan all the excursions for all of the ports. And it's always nice to try to find things that really cater to the guests. And I try to offer a good variety. There's a lot of excursions to choose from in all the ports of call. But I'm always happy to work with the group leader as well as our specialist in our company to cater the cruise to whoever it is that's coming on, and also to give recommendations once they're on board. We always sit down with the leader or guests that really want to get into more detail, or if they say, I want to go biking every day of this cruise, that is what I want to do, then we would sit down with them and help them find these locations and reach out to make reservations or bookings. So I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, it definitely did. I think that provides a lot of color for our agents there. And I think you've kind of segued right into the next question of could you just speak about the accessibility on board or any accommodations that you can provide to clients who may have allergies or food aversions or anything like that?
Sure thing. So in the manifest, so basically when a guest signs up for a cruise, of course, they make a deposit, and then we ask them to fill out some questionnaires well in advance. And then there is a manifest that is sent to the ship pretty far in advance, usually maybe 2 to 3 weeks prior. And it says all of their allergies, or if they have a special diet that they are on, celiac, or they're vegan, then we do our absolute best to accommodate them. We always have on our meals for lunch and dinner, vegetarian options on the menu. We always have items that are always available. So we have our menu that changes every day, but then we also have the right side of the menu that is always the same. But we really cater to any type of special dietary restrictions, and our food and beverage manager on day one is always available to answer any questions, or if somebody wanted to speak with them about said diet, then we're always able to accommodate. But the absolute best is when we know in advance, because it's challenging sometimes in some of the smaller ports of call to be able to find some of these items, and what's offered in the US might not be offered in Canada. So we really need to know in advance of any special restrictions, requests, and we do our absolute best. And even accessibility physically, we have all of our deckhands are trained and experienced to assist any type of mobility level on and off the ship. All of our ship, we have an elevator that goes up to deck 5. Deck 4 and 5, there is open seating outside, but our top deck, deck 6, you would need to take the stairs to get up there. The elevator does not go all the way up to the top, but there's still outside seatings, deck 5 and 4. And then, of course, that's another thing too. If somebody is not able to walk and they are in a scooter or a wheelchair, that is definitely something to be noted in advance, because in Canada, the ADA is not the same as it is in the USA. Not every motor coach company has coaches with lifts. So it's something that is a little bit more challenging, but with advance notice, we could make alternate arrangements. So I guess at the end of it, as long as we know in advance of any special requests or needs, we can do our absolute best to accommodate.
Great, you hit all the points there, and someone was asking about elevators right when you started answering it. So thank you, Kristen.
Sure.
And then a lot of people are asking about the excursions that you all offer. They might have missed it, so could we just go back and talk about what is included in terms of excursions and what is not?
Sure. So every day it differs. So in each port of call, we have featured, premium, or signature experiences. Featured means they're included. We typically offer one featured excursion in every port. And then premium excursions are typically less than $100. So anything that is $99 and below is a premium excursion. Signature excursions are $100 or more. But that could also change, because we have some experiences that are less than 100, like food tours, where guests, once you sign up for that, we're sending the numbers. So the different restaurants can start to prepare for the number of visitors that we're going to send them. So food experiences, I consider to be signature, because we need to know in advance if you're joining us or not. So signature excursions are non-refundable. Once you sign up for those, they are non-refundable. So they could be some experiences, like I said, ones that include food, or they are over $100. All the other excursions that are premium, which are less than 100, those are refundable up to 48 hours of that excursion departure, just because some of these experiences are also open to the public. So I would hate to hold 50 of their seats and then last minute we have 20 people cancel for some reason. We are still being charged for those seats because they could have sold them to the public. So the excursions vary, and I know on our website they have some additional examples of some of our signature excursions. But again, we're always adding new excursions here and there. When somebody presents a wonderful idea, I really want to test it out. So the excursions are always changing, but the guests would receive 2 months prior all of the ones that would be offered for their trip.
Perfect. That answered the question to a T. And so to wrap up here, we do have a few minutes, and this question is for both you and Melissa. For those advisors who may have clients who are used to sailing on smaller boats or smaller ships or river cruising, but they're on a different brand, how would you get them, or what tips would you give our advisors for qualifying those clients to say, yes, this is a good client for our brand? And then how do you get the client then to make that switch to something that's new to them?
Yeah, I think certainly when if they are already just to understand the question, Joe, are they already sailing on small ships? Because that's
They're
such a big part of it. Yeah.
Yep, they're already sailing on small ships, or they're very interested, but they're just not sure which brand might be best for them.
Right. Well, I think qualifying, I suppose, some of the differences between what they're considering. For example, our ships being all balcony, I think, is a major plus as well. So yeah, I think once they're already appreciate the benefits of small ship cruising and they're interested in this particular destination, I think it comes down to a matter of comparing apples to apples and seeing what you're getting by sailing with the Pearl Mist, and one of those being having all balconies, and also where we dock, our docking positions. Like for example, in Mackinac Island. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but are we the only cruise line that docks right in the harbor at Mackinac?
There's one other,
There's
one
one
other
other
cruise line, and then the other is Anchor.
on the other side.
Unless it is the Chicago Yacht Race, which is very popular. It happens every summer. Then if we are like just a couple of days ago, we ended up anchoring for the first time on Mackinac Island, and it wasn't a terrible distance either. But, there are some circumstances where it's not always guaranteed, but at least for this year, that is the only time on Mackinac with the Chicago Yacht Race coming in. But we do, as Melissa's saying, we get into a lot of the ports that the larger ships just cannot. So I think it is a huge benefit and bonus. And we also see a lot of guests that say this is their first small ship. They're only used to the larger ones and they're never going back. So it is really nice and comforting to know that as one of the smaller cruise lines out there, that we're doing a great job for marketing all small ships.
And I think as you're qualifying your clients, if you know they've been cruising, river cruising in Europe, but you start to hear them say things like, "Oh, the jet lag this time was hard to get over," or "The cobblestone, a little more difficult to manage," or we want to stay closer to home for whatever reason. I think another benefit to choosing the Pearl Mist is the Eagle Society that Kristen went through. The fact that they can then reap some benefits if they think that they're going to start cruising domestically, because on the American fleet side, we have 55 unique cruise itineraries that visit 35 different states. So they might start on the Great Lakes, but they might enjoy New England harbor hopping or sailing the Intracoastal or maybe sailing the Mississippi or Alaska with us. So it makes sense for them to get started with a company that has more cruise options to offer, and then they can become part of our loyal Eagle Society and reap some of those benefits, like the complimentary premium excursions after 3 cruises and the complimentary 11th cruise. I think those could be, really important conversations as well.
Perfect. And ladies, we do just have about a minute here left for our webinar session today. I do just want to thank you for all your support to our advisors and collaborating with us here at CLIA to make this happen. If you have any last tips or advice or just words for our group, now would be the time to say it.
Just to say, I think we take for granted what's in our own backyard, and we are seeing a real demand for domestic small ship cruising. There's just so many beautiful places in North America and so many great stories to tell, and that's what we focus on, is telling the stories of these small towns, the culture, the history, and there's so much to learn and discover right here in our own backyards.
Alrighty. Well, ladies, thank you again. Pearl Sea Cruises and American Cruise Lines. We appreciate everything that you guys do for our travel advisor community, and we hope to see everybody on the next one.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.